I hope you're all doing well this morning. Today we're going to read If Polar Bears Disappeared by Lily Williams. This is the Arctic. It's an ecosystem in the far northern region of the globe. Few animals call this land home. The ones that do live here are strong, tough, slow, and sometimes hard to see. Polar bears are believed to have descended from the common brown bear about 400,000 years ago. As brown bears moved farther and farther north, they evolved to fit their new environment. Over time, they became perfectly adapted to the icy Arctic tundra, using the sea ice in traveling, hunting, denning, and reproducing. Even their white fur is an adaptation to this snowy, treeless landscape. Why is their fur white? Remember, we talked about this in class. Tell somebody you're listening with. Although they're the apex predator in the frozen north, polar bears are still vulnerable to threats like pollution and habitat loss. Apex predator means they're on the top. They are a predator to all the other animals that live in the Arctic, and there are no animals that have polar bear as their prey. But even though that they're highest on the food chain, they're still vulnerable to pollution and habitat loss. But the biggest threat to polar bears and other animals in their ecosystem is the melting of the sea ice because of climate change. If too much of the sea ice melted, what do you think would happen if too much of the sea ice melts? If too much of the sea ice melted, polar bears couldn't get enough food to build the layer of fat they need before giving birth to cubs in their dens. Without enough food, polar bears would be weaker than they should be, and females would have fewer cubs. Some of the cubs wouldn't be healthy enough to survive. The lack of available food would also cause hungry polar bears to travel outside their natural habitat, forcing them to compete with other predators. These difficulties would cause the polar bear population to decline, and before long, it could dwindle to none. If too much of the sea ice melted, other Arctic species would be affected as well. If polar bears became extinct, meaning there's no more, the number of ringed seals, polar bears' main source of food, could initially rise. That means at first there would be way more of those seals. However, because ringed seals also rely on sea ice to mate, fish, rest, and give birth, they would struggle to adapt to the changing environment too. If too much of the sea ice melted, ocean predators like orcas would be able to catch more seals, which would cause the seal population to decline even further. With too few seals as prey, orca could move south and disrupting the balance in the predator-prey relationship in those waters. If changes in the Arctic became irreversible, even more species of plants and animals would be affected. If so much of the sea ice melted, the Arctic North would grow even warmer, and the landscape would change permanently. Shrubs that were once hidden under the snow would be exposed and grow larger, crowding out the tundra's usual mosses, fungi, and grasses. Many of these plant species that are not used to growing in this changing landscape could disappear, causing herbivores like caribou to struggle to find enough food. Then what would happen to the caribou? Without enough snow, subnivean mammals like lemmings, who make their dens in the snow, would lose their homes. That means animals that live underneath the ground, right? They would lose their homes, exposing them to the harsh weather in the predators and decreasing their population. With many herbivores gone, non-apex predators such as the snowy owl and the Arctic fox would be the next to lose their main food source. Higher temperatures would also alter the reproductive patterns of insects, which in turn could disrupt the migration and breeding patterns of northern birds who eat insects. Effects like these would begin in the Arctic and spread like a web into different environments. Snow stays cold because its white color reflects the heat of the sun. Okay, so the sun hits it and it reflects back up, right? Sending it back into space. Because bodies of water like the ocean are darker than the snow and ice, they absorb the heat of the sun, which warms the water. Then in a cycle, the warm water causes more sea ice to melt. So this is absorbed when it hits the dark ocean, but it bounces off the white snow or icebergs. The cycle could continue until all the ice has thawed. Then neighboring ecosystems would change and their animals could disappear. This chain event would roll onward, affecting all the different ecosystems from the redwood forests to the hot deserts to the frozen Arctic until we are no longer able to stop it. Fortunately, we still have time to save polar bears and slow the loss of the Arctic ice. Scientists and researchers are working hard to find solutions and educate the public about how ecosystems and organisms are connected to one another. The best way for you to help is to learn everything you can about climate change and how it affects environments like the Arctic. Taking action will lessen its devastating effects, and maybe we will find that the answer to saving polar bears. What do you think the answer to saving polar bears is? Has been right in front of us all along. The end. I want you guys to think about how what you do could impact other environments. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Arctic, but how the things that you do when you're camping or out in nature, going on hikes, affect the environment around you, or even how your everyday activities affect what happens in the world around you, like recycling versus not recycling, and have that conversation with your parent. All right, have a great day.